Eternal Strands was released on January 28th of this year to decent reviews, but between the lack of universal acclaim and its proximity to huge releases like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and Avowed, it left the general conversation just as quickly as it had arrived. I won't sit here and argue that it should have gotten that universal acclaim, but I will argue that it deserves more attention than it's been given. Because Eternal Strands excels at something a lot of us could use right now: being unapologetically kind. You play as Bryn, a magic user, or Weaver, in a world that was ravaged by a magical cataclysm called the Surge nearly 50 years before our adventure begins. At the same time, the former epicenter of magic and innovation, called the Enclave, was shut off from the rest of the world by a mysterious barrier. At the end of the tutorial/prologue, Bryn and her Weaver band follow an Enclave construct through the barrier and into the Enclave to escape a sudden flood of raw magic. Barely 30 minutes into my time with this game, I was already endeared by the character interactions that followed. When speaking to the other members of the Weaver band, some are filled with a sense of wonder at being able to see the Enclave firsthand.
So, our acting point. Is your heart racing at the prospect of traversing these lost lands?
While others are anxious about their chances of survival in a place that was shut off from the rest of the world for so long.
You're no Aurea. I'm sorry. But she has more experience, and who knows what's out there.
You can choose how to respond to these reactions, whether by sharing in their same feelings or simply trying to keep a level head. Regardless of your choices, these conversations do a good job of establishing camaraderie between all of you. Even staples of gaming like upgrading your gear or the stations around the camp are framed as being helpful for everyone, not just yourself. For example, upgrading the Archivist station does allow you to carry more healing tonics, but you're also helping the Archivist chase their dream of learning more about the Enclave along the way. You're all in this together, exploring the unknown and gathering resources to learn about what happened after the Surge, ensure everyone's safety, or unearth knowledge previously assumed to have been lost. Any one of these aspects of the game could serve as a video topic, but there's a series of interactions with one ally in particular that I need to talk about. The progression of side quests for the band's quartermaster, Casman, might just be the best depiction of struggling with mental illness that I've seen in a video game, or at the very least in a game that doesn't have Senua in the title. So consider this a spoiler warning. I'll be going into detail about the side quests called Drowning and Anchored from here on out. Once you're in Act 2 of the main story, the side quest you're able to receive from Casman is odd. She starts off asking for a few supplies salvageable from the capital city, but continues asking you to bring in random supplies from the outskirts in increasingly odd quantities. This culminates in her asking for 90 Drake scales, at which point the band's leader, Aurea, steps in. Casman admits she got carried away trying to be as prepared as possible. She assures the others she's fine, but is clearly frazzled about something. When Act 4 rolls around, everyone's worry over Casman has only grown. Bryn consults with Aurea and Lane, the band's archivist, who informs us of a poorly understood condition called Ira's Plague that is known to affect Casman's people. In this portion of the questline, the part called Drowning, Bryn sets off in search of any information she can find about this affliction within the capital city, and comes across both a diary from someone similarly afflicted and a partial description for a treatment plan. When compiling your findings at Lane's archive, their description tells you that the terminology of Ira's Plague originated from a polytheistic belief system whose followers believe the sufferer is haunted by twisted visions of death and pain until they repent for unjust acts if committed by living a life of strict scrupulosity. The belief is that the goddess of justice, Ira, won't allow the sufferer inner peace until they've righted their past wrongs. The research from the Enclave is more thorough, as they believed it to be a disorder of the mind rather than a form of persecution exclusive to a belief system. The findings also make it clear that this condition is not exclusive to any one people, but that there are familial as well as lifestyle components that play a part. Bryn, Lane, and Aurea bring their findings to Casman, assuring her they are here to help, and asking her permission before seeking further guidance from their newfound allies in the capital.
So, you're saying, if I have Ira's Plague, there's a cure?
We found evidence of a treatment, yes. We'd need to talk to someone at Cassidin's Hold to know more. But we didn't want to speak to someone outside the Weaver Band on your behalf without talking to you first.
This will kick off the portion of the questline called Anchored. This newfound ally, whose title is The Spindle, offers to help concoct a sleeping balm known to alleviate some of the more severe symptoms of people suffering from this condition. I chose a dialogue option where Bryn asked about what else may be needed to cure the condition for Casman, to which the Spindle replies,
It's what she needs to do for herself, sadly. There is no cure for Ira's plague, only treatment and management of the condition.
Through another dialogue choice, the Spindle also remarks that there was never a more scientific name given to this condition, and laments that the current terminology likely only adds to the stigma from those suffering from it.
Then again, using a name that implies an individual has been cursed by a goddess of justice doesn't exactly foster empathy for its sufferers.
Once you track down the required ingredients, she's able to make the balm for Bryn and provide her with the recipe should Casman have need of more in the future. When you return to camp to complete the quest, the entire band gathers around to show their support for Casman. Bryn starts by asking if she's ready to talk about what's been going on. Casman explains that this had all started once the dust settled from their journey into the Enclave, but escalated even further after monstrous beings called the Surgeborn escaped from their imprisonment. This led her to have visions of the band being slaughtered by these creatures, along with a voice howling in her ear telling her it would all be her fault. She describes the conversation as being physically painful.
Even while we're talking, that voice keeps going. In the spaces between my words, in every pause, it howls at me for being pathetic and incompetent.
Through it all, the band listens to her without judgment, encourages her, and even takes over her duties so she can make use of that sleeping balm. Bryn stays by her side until she falls asleep.
I won't let anything happen. I promise.
When you speak to Casman the next morning, she admits to still not feeling great, but also adds that being able to sleep and to share all of her burdens with the band have been helpful. Perhaps most poignantly, she says,
I don't want to pretend I'm feeling on top of the world right now, or like all my problems are solved. They're not. I know I've got a long road ahead of me, but finally saying out loud all the madness in my mind, and not being shunned or rejected for it. It's like all these awful visions lost some of their power over me.
The kindness Eternal Strands radiates is twofold. The first and most obvious example is the kindness all of these characters show to a friend in need.
We're not here to judge. We're here to listen.
You can tell us anything.
But the second, and maybe even more important example, is the kindness of the developers and how they walk us through this entire scenario. This year will mark 10 years since I started therapy for my depression and anxiety, and a lot of the dialogue in these sections hit really close to home. I could see myself in Casman and the way she brushed off everyone's initial concerns.
No, maybe I've been a little off lately, but I'm fine, seriously.
We never want to be struggling, so we find all sorts of ways to rationalize the changes in our mental state or behaviors. For Casman, it was simply wanting to be prepared in case of emergency. For me, my hobbies were bringing me less and less joy because I was too busy or I no longer had time for them. After laying the groundwork for the quest, the devs give us a crash course in stigma and misinformation when it comes to mental illness. In Casman's case, a combination of her race and her religious upbringing are seen as the cause, with the religious explanation giving way to the namesake of Ira's plague. To this day, there are entire groups of people who see mental illness as an indicator for a lack of faith, and others still who would see it as a general weakness that only happens to certain people. Within the game, as in real life, even a minimal amount of credible research will show that mental illness does not discriminate.
A perfect storm of family traits and lifestyle choices, exaggerated by circumstance. Diet, athletics, and sleep all factor in.
It can affect anyone of any race, religion, or any other descriptor. There are countless factors that play into the likelihood of being diagnosed with a mental illness, but there are precisely 0 groups of people who are immune to them. Yellow Brick Games' dedication to authenticity was cemented for me when Bryn approached the Spindle for help. Even in this fictional world of magic and dragons and teleportation, it's made clear that there are some things, like mental illness, that don't have a cure. They could have easily leaned into the fantasy setting and had these sophisticated mages toss Bryn an easy fix for what Casman's going through, but they didn't. It reminds me of how Lev Grossman handled mental health in The Magicians, where Quentin laments, "Wasn't there a spell for making yourself happy?" There are just some things that stay with you for the rest of your life, and you have to fight to get control of at times. But just like Oria tells Casman, trusting others and opening up to them about your struggles isn't a sign of weakness. It's a brave and often difficult step to take.
How come I'm the only one drowning inside this place? No matter what happens, all of you are able to keep doing your jobs. I mean, I'm the only freak going off the deep end. How stupid is that?
You're going through something awful, outside of your control. And until now, you've dealt with it alone. But your decision to be vulnerable and share your experiences with us, that's brave, not stupid.
I don't feel brave. I feel exhausted and sad. But I guess it's nice to hear.
Even after 10 years of therapy, it can be hard to admit to myself that I'm in a depressive episode. I can always find some other reason that I'm worn out. Being a parent, not getting enough sleep, the collapse of democracy. But I'm not exaggerating when I tell you how freeing it is to eventually just say to myself or to my wife, yeah, this is a depressive episode. Like Casman says to Bryn, speaking it out loud takes away some of the power it holds over you. Naming and identifying what you're feeling makes it that much easier to address it. After all, addressing a problem is a bit harder to do when you don't know which problem you're dealing with. I wish all of us were as lucky as I have been, and as lucky as Casman is, to be surrounded by so many supportive people. I love that the developers at Yellow Brick Games went out of their way to put in such a profound, heartfelt, multi-part questline whose sole purpose was to support a friend going through a mental health crisis. The choice to use real-world parallels in a fantastical setting is what makes this portrayal so special to me, and what makes Eternal Strands stand out as a source of kindness in an unkind world. I hope this video has been encouraging to anyone else out there living with mental illness. There's neither a one-size-fits-all explanation, nor a one-size-fits-all solution for any of the myriad diagnoses out there. But with the right plan and the right support, it's possible to have some semblance of normalcy. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, play what you love and love what you play.